At 6:04 a.m. on my 68th birthday, my son-in-law called and whispered a chilling sentence, "Don't come home today, please." I was curious, but didn't ask why. Instead, I stayed silent and moved my $4 million into a secured trust as a way to protect myself. That evening when I saw a strange truck clearing out my house piece by piece, in that moment, I quietly understood that the battle had begun. Hello everyone, I'm glad you made it here. Before we continue, drop your location in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Now think about this. Was that moment just disrespect or the beginning of something worse you'll see soon? Please note, some elements in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, though the core message remains meaningful. By the time I turned onto Westwood Drive that afternoon, I finally understood why my son-in-law Derek had called me at 6:04 that morning, with terror in his voice. A moving truck sat in my driveway. Two men in work shirts were carrying boxes through my front door, and my daughter Vivienne stood on the porch directing them like a general commanding troops. My name is Harold Ashford, and at 68 years old, I have spent 4 decades reading the stories hidden in financial statements, the lies people tell with numbers, the desperation that bleeds through falsified ledgers. I built a career as a forensic accountant exposing fraud. I never imagined I would find it on my own doorstep wearing my daughter's face. I pulled my car to the curb 3 houses down and killed the engine. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of keeping still. Derek Holloway, my son-in-law of 8 years, the man whose mother I had saved from cancer when no one else would help, had called at 6:04 that morning. His voice had been a whisper ragged with something between terror and guilt. "Do not stay home today. Please. They will finish by evening." I had not understood then. I understood now. Vivienne stood on my porch in her designer coat, the one I had complimented last night at dinner, directing movers with crisp efficiency. My daughter, 41 years old, CEO of a company I had helped fund, the girl who used to organize my accounting files for pocket money, now organizing the theft of everything I owned. Have you ever watched someone steal your life in broad daylight? Not metaphorically. Literally watched as strangers carried your memories out your front door while your own child directed the operation. I sat in my car on that November afternoon, keys cutting into my palm, and watched exactly that. The movers were professional, efficient. They believed this was a legitimate job. I could see it in how they handled the boxes, how they called out to each other about weight distribution and truck space. They had no idea they were participating in a crime. Boxes emerged from my house labeled in black marker, living room, office, dining silver, each one a piece of my life being cataloged for removal. Through the open front door, I saw something that stopped my breath. Eleanor's piano. The silence of the Steinway grand piano catching the morning light was the heartbeat of this house. For 5 years I had kept it tuned and dust-free, a shrine to the evenings Eleanor spent filling these walls with Chopin and Debussy. Watching strangers handle it like common inventory earlier that afternoon had been a second funeral, a brutal reminder that to Vivienne, her mother's music was now just an asset to be liquidated. Vivienne was wrapping it in moving blankets like it was furniture, like it was inventory, like her mother had never existed. One of the movers called out to another, "Careful with that. She said it is worth more than your truck." He laughed. They both laughed. And I sat in my car watching strangers joke about the monetary value of my wife's ghost while my daughter supervised the extraction. 40 years of reading fraud and financial statements. I never thought I would see it written across my own front door. I heard Vivienne's voice carry across the lawn. "Start with the office. The safe needs a dolly. It is bolted to the floor." Of course she knew it was bolted. I had shown her myself years ago when I still believed I was teaching my daughter responsibility, when I still believed she was my daughter. The November wind cut through the car. I had not closed my window all the way. The cold felt appropriate. My body was registering what my mind was still trying to reject. Today was my 68th birthday. Last night my daughter threw me a party. This afternoon she was robbing me blind. The cake had not even gone stale. I remember dinner now with new clarity. Vivienne smiling across the table, refilling my wine glass, asking casual questions about my estate plans. "Happy birthday, Dad. 68, can you believe it? We should really discuss your estate plans soon." I had thought she was being responsible, forward-thinking. I had been proud of her. Derek had barely eaten. His fork pushed food around his plate. His eyes kept darting to Vivienne, then away. At the time, I thought he might be feeling unwell. Now, I knew what that look had been. It was guilt. It was horror. It was a man watching his wife plan the destruction of someone he loved. The birthday dinner was not a celebration. It was reconnaissance. My daughter had used my own birthday party as a heist briefing, and I had handed her the information she needed between bites of the cake she had baked. I sat at the curb keys still in my hand, watching my daughter orchestrate the dismantling of everything I had built. But I did not approach. Not yet. Because Derek's warning had not just told me to stay away. It had told me why. And what I had learned since that 6:04 a.m. phone call had turned my shock into something far more dangerous. Understanding. I knew about the forged documents now. I knew about the notary appointment scheduled for this afternoon. I knew about Gordon's discovery that someone had accessed my property records from inside my own home during last night's dinner party. My daughter thought I was at a fake doctor's appointment right now. She thought I would come home this evening to find an empty house and legal papers declaring me mentally incompetent. She thought she had planned this perfectly. She had forgotten who taught her to read a spreadsheet. I watched a mover carry out a box labeled Kitchen Silverware Eleanor. My wife's name reduced to a sorting category. My daughter's voice carried across the lawn, efficient and cold. I did not move from the car. Not yet. Because the most important lesson I had learned in 40 years of forensic accounting was this. You do not confront the thief until you understand the full scope of the theft. And I was only beginning to understand what my daughter had stolen from me. But I need to tell you about that morning, the morning before I discovered my daughter was robbing me, because you cannot understand what I lost without knowing what I had. I woke to birdsong in Eleanor's garden. November light filtered through curtains she had chosen 20 years ago. The house was quiet in that particular way only widowers understand. Not peaceful, but waiting for a voice that would never come again. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. Her side of the bed still somehow felt occupied by absence. 5 years since the cancer took her, and I still woke reaching for her hand. Some mornings I could almost feel her fingers closing around mine. Those were the worst mornings, and the best. I rose slowly the way older men do, feeling every year in my joints. 68 today. Eleanor used to say 68 was not old, just well-seasoned. I could hear her voice even now, teasing me about the gray in my hair, the reading glasses I needed for financial statements, the way I groaned when I stood up too fast. She had made aging feel like an adventure we were taking together. Now, I was taking it alone. 68 years old, 4 decades reading fraud in spreadsheets, a dead wife, a distant daughter, and a birthday that would end with my life being packed into boxes. But that morning, I was just a man missing his wife, believing the day might actually be good. I made coffee in the kitchen she had designed, walked through the back door she had painted blue, and stepped into the garden she had loved more than any room in our house. November had stripped most of the color away, but Eleanor's roses still held a few stubborn blooms. She had planted them the year Vivian was born, 41 years ago. She said roses and daughters both needed patience, steady care, and the wisdom to know when to prune. I knelt beside her favorite bush, the deep red climber that covered the back fence, and spoke to it the way she used to. She is coming for dinner tonight, Vivienne. First time she has hosted my birthday since you left. The roses did not answer. Plants are better listeners than accountants, Eleanor used to say. I believed her. I talked to this garden every morning, telling the flowers about my day, about the news about the daughter who had grown so distant since her mother died. It was not madness. It was simply the only way I knew to keep Eleanor's voice alive. I trimmed a few dead leaves, checked the winter mulch, felt the November cold seeping through my garden gloves. Somewhere in the neighborhood, someone was already playing Christmas music. Too early for that. Eleanor would have complained. I smiled at the thought. Inside, I paused in the living room doorway. Eleanor's Steinway grand piano sat where it had always sat in front of the bay window, catching the morning light. She had played every evening for 35 years. Debussy in spring, Chopin in winter, show tunes when she was feeling playful. I would read beside her, not really reading, just listening to her fingers find the music. The piano had been silent for 5 years. Vivienne had played Chopin at the funeral, a nocturne the one Eleanor had taught her when she was 7 years old. She played it beautifully, tears falling onto the keys, and then she closed the lid like she was sealing a coffin. She never touched it again. Neither did I. Some instruments are meant to stay silent. Some songs are too painful to hear. I walked to the piano now and lifted the lid. Dust had gathered despite my weekly cleaning. I touched middle C and winced at how out of tune it sounded. I should have it tuned. I should have someone come and bring it back to life. But that would mean someone else touching what Eleanor had touched last, and I could not bear that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I closed the lid gently and went to prepare for the evening. The shower was too hot. I turned it hotter anyway. The blue shirt Eleanor had given me on our 30th anniversary still fit, though it pulled slightly across the shoulders now. I knotted the tie she had chosen to match it, watching my hands move through motions she had taught me decades ago. She always said I tied a knot like I was strangling a suspect. She was not entirely wrong. Vivienne was hosting dinner tonight. My daughter, my only child. The girl who used to organize my accounting files for pocket money, who learned piano from her mother, who cried when she left for college and called 3 times that first week. That girl had become a woman I barely recognized. CEO of a company I had helped fund. Driven successful cold. She visited twice a year since Eleanor died, called on holidays, sent cards that felt written by an assistant. But this past week she had called 3 times. 3 times in 1 week after months of silence, asking how I was feeling, whether I was staying sharp, if I had thought about seeing a doctor for a checkup. A forensic accountant learns to see patterns that do not want to be seen, the number that is too round, the signature that is too perfect. The daughter who suddenly shows interest asking if you are healthy, asking if you are still mentally sharp. I should have recognized it. The pattern was right there wearing lipstick and calling me daddy for the first time in years. But I dismissed it, told myself I was paranoid, told myself she was finally trying to reconnect, to heal the distance that had grown since her mother's death. I wanted so badly to believe it that I ignored what my instincts were screaming. As I knotted my tie in the mirror, I caught my own reflection. 68 years old, still sharp, still here. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question I could not quite name. Why did Vivienne need to know if I was still sharp? Why did that matter now? I would find out that night at dinner. And by the next afternoon, standing at the curb watching movers carry my life away in boxes, I would understand exactly why she had asked. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Vivienne was never early, never late. Precision was her signature inherited from me, along with the sharp cheekbones and the inability to trust round numbers. I opened the door to find my daughter standing in November twilight, her smile slightly too wide, her eyes scanning my face like she was searching for cracks. Happy birthday, Dad. 68. You do not look a day over 65. How are you feeling? Sharp as ever. There it was again. That word, sharp. She had used it 3 times this week. I hugged her, and she held on half a second too long, the way people do when they are performing affection, rather than feeling it. Behind her, Derek hung back near the porch, railing his face pale in the evening light. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. And beside Derek stood a stranger. Marcus Gallagher stepped forward and extended his hand with the polished confidence of a man who had practiced his smile in mirrors. 46 years old, according to Vivienne's quick introduction, co-founder and CFO of her logistics company. Someone whose presence at a family birthday dinner required more explanation than Vivienne offered. His handshake was firm, his eye contact unwavering, and his questions about my career were just pointed enough to make the accountant in me start keeping count. Mr. Ashford, it is an honor. Vivienne speaks so highly of you. The forensic accountant who can spot a decimal out of place from 50 feet. Let me tell you something about forensic accountants. We do not stop working when we leave the office. Every handshake is a data point. Every smile is a ledger entry. And Marcus Gallagher's handshake told me a story he did not mean to share. Firm enough to project confidence, but held half a second too long, like a salesman closing a deal he was not sure he had won. Derek barely whispered his greeting. Happy birthday, Harold. His eyes met mine for one moment, and I saw something in them that I could not identify. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Then Vivienne took his arm and guided everyone inside, positioning herself between me and my son-in-law like a wall. I led them to the dining room where I had set the table with Eleanor's china. The good set. The one she saved for special occasions. I wanted to honor her memory, to show Vivienne that I was not just surviving, but living. Now, watching my daughter settle into her mother's chair with that painted smile, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Dinner was roast chicken with rosemary from Eleanor's garden. I had cooked it myself, following her recipe card. Her handwriting faded, but still legible after 30 years. Vivienne complimented it 3 times. Marcus complimented it 4. Derek did not touch his food. Derek sat at my table like a man attending his own funeral. He pushed chicken around his plate. He nodded at jokes without laughing. and every few minutes his eyes would drift to Vivian with an expression that looked almost like grief. Whatever was happening here, Derek knew, and knowing was destroying him. Marcus dominated the conversation with practiced ease. He asked about my career, my retirement, my daily routine. Fascinating field, forensic accounting. You must have seen some incredible cases. People hiding money in the strangest places. He leaned forward when I answered, cataloging my responses like data points. I recognized the technique. I had used it myself in depositions. Vivian joined the interrogation with softer questions. Dad, you should eat more. You look thin. Are you taking care of yourself? Eating regularly, remembering your medications. I do not take medications, I said. Never have. She laughed too quickly. Of course, of course. I just meant vitamins. You know, I did not know, but I was beginning to understand. The main course arrived at the table, and with it, the pattern became clear. Every question circled back to the same themes: my health, my memory, my mental sharpness, my property. It was the same script I had seen in elder fraud cases for 15 years, establishing baseline behavior, probing for cognitive weakness, mapping the target's vulnerabilities. I had investigated elder fraud for 15 years. I had seen children empty their parents' accounts, forge signatures on deeds, convince courts that sharp-minded seniors were declining. I knew the playbook by heart, and my daughter was running it, on me, at my own birthday dinner, with the good china. Vivienne leaned forward, her voice soft with rehearsed concern. You know, Dad, 68 is not that old, but it might be time to start thinking about simplifying things. You do not need all this house, do you? I have thought about it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Have not decided anything. Marcus jumped in too quickly. Big houses can be complicated. Property taxes, maintenance, all that paperwork must be exhausting to manage alone. There it was, the real question beneath all the questions. They wanted to know about the house, about my assets, about how much of my life they could package and carry away. Derek excused himself to use the bathroom. He was gone for 10 minutes. When he returned, his eyes were red. After dinner, Vivian insisted on coffee in the living room. She guided me to the armchair facing away from the office hallway, the chair with the worst view of the house. Derek positioned himself by the window, staring at nothing, and Marcus excused himself to use the bathroom, except the bathroom was to the left, and he turned right, toward my office, toward the safe. I said nothing, but I watched, and in my jacket pocket my phone was already composing a text to Gordon Whitfield, my attorney of 20 years. Need the trust documents ready. Tonight. Something is wrong. Vivienne poured coffee with steady hands, chattering about the logistics company, about expansion plans, about how proud Eleanor would be. She did not notice my silence. She did not notice that I had stopped drinking the wine she kept refilling. She did not notice that the father she thought she was manipulating had spent 40 years learning to read exactly this kind of story. The evening ended with strained goodbyes. Vivian hugged me again too long, too tight. Derek could not meet my eyes. Marcus shook my hand and told me to take care of myself, his voice carrying a weight that felt almost like a threat. I closed the door behind them and stood in my empty hallway, Eleanor's china still on the table, Eleanor's roses wilting in their vase. My birthday dinner had not been a celebration. It had been a reconnaissance mission, and whatever my daughter was planning, she thought I would never see it coming. She had forgotten who taught her to count. Marcus returned from the bathroom 6 minutes later. I know because I counted. He settled back into his chair with the satisfied ease of a man who had found exactly what he was looking for, and Vivian immediately steered the conversation toward what she called practical matters. That is when the real interrogation began. Dad, I have been thinking. She leaned forward, her wine glass untouched, her eyes fixed on mine with rehearsed concern. You are living alone in this big house. Have you thought about what happens if something happens to you? Is everything organized? Is the house in a trust? I have thought about it, I said, keeping my voice deliberately vague. Gordon has helped me with some paperwork over the years. But is it current? Vivian pressed. When did you last update your estate documents? Things change, tax laws change. You should really have someone look at everything. I want you to understand something about the questions my daughter asked me that night. These were not the fumbling inquiries of a concerned child. These were targeted, systematic. The same sequence I had taught fraud investigators to use when building a case against elder exploitation. Establish isolation, assess cognitive state, map the assets, locate the documents. My daughter was running the playbook I had written. Marcus jumped in with practiced smoothness. What Vivian means is, at a certain point, it makes sense to consolidate. Simplify. Make sure the people you trust, have access to, help you if needed. The people you trust, like a daughter and her business partner. How convenient. Exactly, Vivian said. And with the house worth what it is now, what is it worth, Dad? $2 million more. You want to make sure it is protected. $2.1 million, I said. According to the last assessment, I should not have given her that number, but I wanted to see what she would do with it. Her eyes flickered to Marcus for half a second. A tell. They had already discussed the house value. They were confirming, not discovering. Derek had not touched his food in 20 minutes. His fork sat beside a full plate like a white flag of surrender. Every time Vivian asked about my estate, he flinched. Every time Marcus smoothed over a too obvious question, Derek's hands gripped the edge of the table a little tighter. Whatever was happening, my son-in-law knew, and knowing was eating him alive. Maybe we should talk about something else, Derek said suddenly. His voice cracked on the last word. Vivian shot him a look that could have frozen water. We are just having a conversation, Derek. Dad knows we are only worried about him. Of course, I said. I appreciate the concern. The dinner grew colder on our plates. Vivian asked about my daily routine. Marcus asked about my health. Both circled back again and again to the same themes: my mental sharpness, my memory, my ability to manage my own affairs. It was an assessment dressed up as small talk. Then Vivian asked the question that sealed my certainty. Where do you keep your important documents, Dad? The deed, the trust papers, insurance documents. She tilted her head with daughterly concern that did not reach her eyes. You should have someone know where everything is, in case of emergency. In 40 years of forensic accounting, I learned that every fraud has a tell. The moment the con artist overreaches, asks one question too many, reveals what they are really after. Vivian's tell came with the document question. She needed to know where I kept my papers, not if they were organized, where, because whatever they were planning required those documents. And they needed them before I figured out what was happening. They are in a safe place, I said. Gordon knows where everything is. Gordon, your attorney. Vivian's jaw tightened with frustration she could not quite hide. But what about family? I smiled at her. The same smile I used to give her when she was 7 years old and tried to convince me she had not eaten the cookies. Gordon is family, I said. He has been my attorney for 15 years. Vivian's frustration flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. Of course. That is good. That is responsible. Excuse me, I said, pushing back from the table. I need to use the restroom. I did not go to the restroom. I walked down the hall past the bathroom and into my office. I closed the door quietly behind me and pulled out my phone. Gordon Whitfield answered on the second ring. He always did for me. In 15 years as my attorney, Gordon had never kept me waiting. A man of 58 with silver hair and the deliberate speech patterns of someone who measured every word, Gordon was the kind of lawyer who thought in decades rather than days. His firm did not advertise. His clients did not leave. Gordon, I said, keeping my voice low, the trust documents you prepared, are they ready to sign? A pause. They have been ready for 2 weeks. Why? What is happening? My daughter is asking questions, I said. The wrong questions. I need those documents signed tonight, before they can stop me. I heard Gordon's chair creak as he sat up straighter. I will file them electronically the moment you sign. Harold, what exactly are you telling me? I looked around my office, the same office Marcus had visited during his 6-minute bathroom break. I could see it now, the subtle disturbances. A folder moved, a drawer not quite closed. He had been in here. He had been looking. I am telling you, I said slowly, that my daughter is trying to steal my house, and I intend to make sure she cannot. Silence on the line, then Gordon's voice steady and sharp. I am sending the documents to your email now. Digital signature is legally binding. Sign them, and I will file before midnight. Whatever they are planning, your assets will be protected by a revocable living trust that names me as successor trustee. They would have to go through the courts to even attempt access, and it would not hold up under scrutiny. Do it, I said. I ended the call and stood in the darkness of my office, listening to my daughter's laughter drifting down the hall. She was telling Marcus some story, something about work, something that did not matter. She thought I was a confused old man who would not see her coming. She had forgotten who taught her to count, who taught her to read the numbers that people tried to hide. I opened my email and waited for Gordon's documents to arrive. Gordon's email arrived while I stood in the darkness of my office, listening to my daughter's laughter in the other room. The trust documents were exactly where he said they would be. Attachment PDF. 32 pages that would determine whether I spent my final years in the home I had built with Eleanor or in some state facility, while strangers auctioned off my memories. I signed each page with the deliberate precision of a man defusing a bomb. House protected, investments protected, retirement accounts protected. $4.05 million transferred into a revocable living trust that named Gordon Whitfield as successor trustee. My daughter could not touch a single dollar without going through the courts. I photographed the final signature and texted it to Gordon. His reply came in 30 seconds. Filing now, confirmation in 10 minutes. $4 million, 40 years of work. Eleanor's home, Eleanor's garden, Eleanor's piano. All of it now locked behind legal walls that my daughter could not breach. I should have felt triumphant. I felt like I was attending my own family's funeral. Gordon's second text arrived. Filed. Trust is now active. Harold, call me tomorrow. We need to talk about what is happening. I put my phone in my pocket and walked back toward the living room. Whatever victory I had, it tasted like ashes. I had just legally defended myself against my own child. Against the baby I had held in the delivery room 41 years ago. Against the girl who used to run to me when she was scared. Against Vivienne. I stopped in the doorway. Vivienne was standing by the coffee table. My wallet was open in her hands. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked up, and her face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation as performance. The performance won. Oh, Dad, I had a headache, looking for aspirin. The aspirin had been in the bathroom medicine cabinet since Vivienne was 12 years old. She had gotten headaches as a teenager from stress, from school, from being the daughter of 2 perfectionists. She had taken that aspirin 1,000 times. She knew exactly where it was, and she had just lied to my face about it while holding my open wallet. The aspirin is in the bathroom, I said quietly. Where it has been since you were 12. Right, of course. She laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. I forgot. Old habits. She held out the wallet. I took it. Our fingers did not touch. Across the room, Derek stood by the window, looking like a man watching an execution. His face had gone past pale into something gray. His hands gripped the windowsill so hard I could see his knuckles turning white. He knew. Whatever was happening, he knew, and the knowing was destroying him. Marcus checked his watch with theatrical concern. We should probably get going. Early meeting tomorrow. He put his hand on Vivienne's back, guiding her toward the door. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Ashford. Happy birthday. The goodbyes were strained. Vivienne hugged me again, but this time I felt her checking my jacket pocket. Looking for something. My phone maybe, or more documents. I kept my arms at my sides and let her embrace air. Derek was last out the door. He paused on the threshold, and for one moment I thought he might say something, might warn me, might break whatever hold Vivienne and Marcus had over him. Happy birthday, Harold, he said. His voice sounded like an apology. Then they were gone. I stood in my empty living room, holding my wallet, listening to their car pull away. Eleanor's roses were wilting in their vase. The dinner dishes were still on the table. The house felt larger than it had in years, larger and emptier, as if something essential had been removed. I opened the wallet. I had investigated identity theft for 30 years. I knew the components: a signature sample, a government ID, a social security number. With those 3 pieces, a skilled forger could become anyone. Sign any document, transfer any property, commit any crime in your name while you slept. My daughter had just collected all 3 from my wallet. She had not been looking for aspirin. She had been assembling a weapon. My driver's license was in the wrong slot. It had been in the front pocket for 15 years. Now it was in the back, as if someone had removed it, photographed it, and replaced it carelessly. My social security card, which I kept behind my insurance card, had been moved to the front. And in the small pocket where I kept a folded check with my signature for reference, there was nothing. The check was gone. She had my signature. She had my identification. She had my social security number. Everything needed to forge documents in my name: power of attorney, property transfers, medical directives. With those 3 components, Vivienne could sign away my house while I slept, and I would not know until I woke up homeless. Except she could not. Because while she was rifling through my wallet, I had been signing trust documents that made everything she stole worthless. She had the keys, but I had changed the locks. I sat in Eleanor's chair until midnight, wallet in my lap, running scenarios. Whatever Vivian was planning required forged documents, which meant she needed my signature, which she now had. But to execute a property transfer, she would need more than forgery. She would need a notary, witnesses, me out of the house. She would need time. I went to bed at 12:30 expecting nothing and prepared for anything. At 6:04 a.m., my phone rang. Derek's name glowed on the screen in the darkness of my bedroom. I answered before the second ring. His voice was barely a whisper, shaking with something between terror and guilt. "Do not stay home today. Please, Harold, they will finish by evening." The line went dead. I was already reaching for my car keys, my heart pounding my mind cataloging everything I knew. My daughter had my signature, my identification, a plan that would finish by evening. And my son-in-law, the man whose mother I had saved from cancer 7 years ago, had just risked everything to warn me. The hunt had begun. I was already awake when the phone rang at 6:04 a.m. Not 6:05, 6:04 exactly. I had been staring at the ceiling for an hour running numbers in my head, the way I used to do before fraud trials. Sleep had not come. My wallet sat on the nightstand, emptied of everything that mattered, evidence of a crime not yet committed. The caller ID said Derek Holloway. My son-in-law had never called me at 6 in the morning, not in 8 years of marriage to my daughter, not once. I answered before the second ring. "Harold." His voice was barely a whisper, ragged with fear. "It is Derek. Listen to me. Do not say anything. Just listen." I listened. "Do not stay home today, please. Do not go home early either. They will finish by evening." "Derek, what?" "I cannot. I am sorry. I am so sorry." The line went dead. 11 seconds. That is how long the call lasted. 11 seconds to tell me my daughter was planning something so terrible that my son-in-law was willing to risk his marriage to warn me. What do you say in 11 seconds? Apparently everything that matters. Do not stay home. They will finish by evening. I am sorry. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Then I rose and walked to the kitchen on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The coffee maker started on autopilot. I had been making coffee in this kitchen for 35 years. My hands knew the motions even when my mind was somewhere else entirely. This morning, my mind was dissecting Derek's warning word by word. They, not she, they will finish by evening. Vivian was not working alone. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. The business partner with the rehearsed smile and the 6-minute bathroom break and the questions about my property. Finish. They will finish. Something was already in motion. Had been since last night probably. Since Marcus went to my office. Since Vivienne rifled through my wallet. Since they collected everything they needed to become me on paper. By evening, there was a deadline, a window. They needed me gone for a specific amount of time, long enough to do whatever they were planning to do. I stood in my kitchen coffee maker, gurgling first sunlight, touching Eleanor's garden through the window, and I felt like I was reading my own autopsy report. The time of death tonight. The cause my daughter. The weapon my own signature forged onto documents I had never seen. But the victim was not going to cooperate. Not this victim. Not today. I poured coffee I could not drink and thought about Derek. Derek Holloway, 40 years old. Logistics manager at Vivian's company. My son-in-law for 8 years. A good man trapped in an impossible position. 7 years ago, Derek's mother Iris was dying. Cancer had spread from her lungs to her lymph nodes to everywhere else. The treatment that might save her cost $240,000. Insurance said no. Derek had nothing. Vivian had nothing. They came to me not to ask for money, but to say goodbye, to tell me they were moving Iris into hospice to let me meet her before she died. I wrote the check the same day. "Your mother is my family now," I told Derek while he stared at the number, with tears streaming down his face. "You do not owe me anything. Just take care of my daughter." "I will," he said. "I promise. I will always take care of Vivian." Iris survived. The treatment worked. She was alive because I wrote a check and Derek knew it. He had promised to take care of Vivian. Now Vivian was trying to rob me blind, and Derek was keeping his promise the only way left, by betraying her to save me. Some debts can never be repaid. Some can only be redirected. Derek was terrified. I had heard it in his voice, in the way he whispered in the 11 seconds he rationed out, like a dying man's last breaths. He was risking his marriage, his job, his entire life. Whatever Vivian and Marcus were planning was so serious that Derek chose his debt to me over his loyalty to his wife. Which meant whatever was happening was worse than I had imagined. At 7 o'clock, I called Gordon Whitfield. The trust is filed, he said immediately. You are protected. I need you to check something. My property records, county system. Can you see if anyone has accessed them recently? A pause. I heard typing the click of a mouse. Then Gordon's voice changed, sharper, colder. Harold, someone accessed your title history at 11:47 last night, from your home IP address. I sat down slowly. I was in bed by 10:30. I know, Gordon said. And there is something else? A mobile notary appointment is scheduled for 2 p.m. today, at your address, in your name. I had not scheduled any notary appointment. They are coming from my house, I said quietly. Yes, Gordon replied. And based on this, they are planning to sign documents in your name while you are not there to stop them. The pieces fell into place with the terrible clarity of a completed puzzle. Marcus had accessed my property records during his bathroom break using my home network. They had my signature from the wallet, my ID, my social security number. The notary appointment was the final piece. At 2 p.m., someone pretending to be me would sign over my house, my investments, everything, except they could not, because the trust I had signed the night before would expose and invalidate everything she tried to use against me. The house was protected. The investments were protected. Everything was protected. But they did not know that. Gordon, I said, do not cancel the notary appointment. What? Let them come. Let them think everything is going according to plan. I want to see what they bring, what documents, what story they have prepared. I want to catch them in the act. Harold, that is dangerous. You should call the police. Not yet. Not until I see the full scope. Not until I know everything. I ended the call and sat alone in my kitchen, coffee cold in my hands, morning light, now fully illuminating Eleanor's roses outside the window. My daughter was coming to steal my house today. She had brought a business partner, a forged signature, and a notary to make it legal. She thought I was a confused old man who would never see it coming. But I was not confused. I was a forensic accountant with 40 years of experience catching thieves. And my son-in-law had just given me the one thing every investigator needs: advance warning. I had until 2 p.m. to prepare, and I intended to use every minute. I called Gordon back at 7:15. My coffee had gone cold, but I could not bring myself to pour another cup. There was too much to process, too many pieces clicking into place with terrible precision. Gordon's voice had changed. In 15 years of working together, I had heard him calm. I had heard him cautious. I had even heard him concerned. But I had never heard him sound like this, cold and focused. The way a surgeon sounds when they find something on the scan they were not looking for. Harold, he said slowly, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I am listening. The county system logs every access to property records. Standard procedure security compliance. Someone pulled up your complete title history at 11:47 p.m. last night. I felt the floor shift beneath me. I was in bed by 10:30. The dinner ended around 9. The access came from your home IP address. Gordon's voice remained steady, clinical. That means whoever did this was either in your house or connected to your network. 11:47 p.m. Think about that time. At 11:47 p.m., I was in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being paranoid about my own daughter. At 11:47 p.m., someone in my house was accessing my property records, researching exactly how much I was worth and how to take it from me. While I slept in Eleanor's house, they were calculating how to steal it. Marcus went to the bathroom for 6 minutes, I said. Walked toward my office instead of the bathroom. Then we know who Gordon replied. Now we need to know why. He paused. I heard typing in the background the click of a mouse. Then his voice changed again. Sharper now, more alarmed. There is more. A mobile notary service shows an appointment scheduled for 2 p.m. today, at your address, in your name. I did not schedule any notary. I know you did not, but someone did. Gordon exhaled slowly. Harold, the service requires ID verification and signature. If they have samples of both, Vivienne went through my wallet last night, said she was looking for aspirin. Then they have everything they need to impersonate you on paper. A mobile notary at 2 p.m. in my name, at my address. The pieces fell into place like tumblers in a lock. Click, click, click. The wallet was not searched for aspirin. It was harvested for ID. Marcus's bathroom break was not a bathroom break. It was reconnaissance. The birthday dinner was not a celebration. It was a heist briefing, and I was supposed to be the Mark who did not see it coming. Here is what I think they are planning, Gordon continued. A power of attorney, giving your daughter control over your finances. Maybe a property transfer. They will forge your signature present ID and have a notary legitimize it. But the trust I started, the trust protects you. Gordon's voice softened slightly. They cannot transfer property that is already in trust without trustee authorization. But Harold, they do not know you signed that trust last night. I sat with that for a moment. They think they are stealing from an unprotected man. Exactly, which means they will proceed with the plan. And when they do, they will be committing documented fraud against assets they legally cannot touch. Gordon outlined what he expected. Power of attorney documents, possibly property transfer papers, maybe even a medical directive, all forged, all designed to give Vivian and whoever she was working with complete control over my life. They would sign in my name, the notary would witness, and by evening they would believe they owned everything I had. Except they would not. Because the trust I signed at my desk last night while my daughter rifled through my wallet in the other room made every forged document worthless. The house was protected. The investments were protected. Everything Eleanor and I had built together was locked behind legal walls they did not even know existed. Harold, Gordon's voice turned stern, do not go home until after 2 p.m. Whatever you do, do not sign anything. Not a single document. Not even if Vivian hands it to you herself. Are we clear? Gordon's advice was clear. Stay away. Document everything. Sign nothing. Let them walk into their own trap. But I was not going to stay away. My house, my wife's memory, my daughter's betrayal. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to watch my daughter try to steal my life and know that I had already beaten her. Some traps only work if the target walks into them willingly. I intended to be that target with my own trap waiting. I will be careful, I said. Harold, Gordon said quietly, I know this is your daughter. I am sorry. I thanked him and ended the call. The morning sun was fully up now, flooding Eleanor's kitchen with light that felt like an accusation. Her recipe cards were still in the drawer by the stove. Her favorite coffee mug was still in the cabinet unused since the day she died. I had kept everything exactly as she left it, a museum to a marriage that had lasted 47 years. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat at the table where I had eaten breakfast with my wife for 35 years. The same table where we had celebrated Vivian's report cards and worried about her college applications and toasted her wedding. The same table where Eleanor had told me the cancer was back, and this time there was nothing anyone could do. As I waited for my world to end, I found myself asking the question that had haunted me since Derek's call. When had Vivian changed? When had my daughter become someone capable of this? The answer I knew was 5 years ago, the day we buried Eleanor, the day something in Vivian broke and never healed. She had not just lost her mother that day. She had lost something else, something I could not name. I sipped my coffee and watched the sun climb higher through the kitchen window. Eleanor's roses were still blooming in the garden, stubborn against the November cold. She would have loved them. She would have hated what our daughter had become. I had until 2 p.m. hours to sit with the knowledge of what was coming. Hours to remember when Vivian was still the girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. Hours to mourn the daughter I had lost long before today. I poured the cold coffee down the sink and started preparing for war. The photograph was still on the refrigerator. Vivian at 7 years old, sitting at Eleanor's piano, her small fingers reaching for keys she could not quite span. Eleanor standing behind her hands, guiding both of them, laughing at something I had said from behind the camera. That was the girl I remembered. That was the daughter I had raised. Where had she gone? I pulled the photograph from its magnet and held it in my hands. The edges were worn soft from years of being moved during cleaning, then carefully returned to the same spot. Eleanor had put it there the week after it was taken. It had not moved since. Vivian used to organize my accounting files for pocket money. 7 years old, tongue between her teeth, making sure every column balanced. Numbers tell stories, Daddy, she would say, repeating what I had taught her. You just have to know how to read them. 34 years later, she was using those same skills to forge my signature and steal my house. I had taught her too well. She had been Eleanor's student too. Piano lessons every Tuesday and Thursday scales until her fingers ached Chopin when she got older. Music is a conversation, not a conquest, Eleanor would tell her. Feel the keys. Do not fight them. Vivian had fought them anyway. She fought everything. But she had learned to play beautifully, and Eleanor had been so proud. We had been a happy family in this house. Sunday dinners around the table where I was now sitting alone. Recitals where Vivian played nervously, and Eleanor cried in the audience. Graduations, promotions, the wedding, where I walked my daughter down the aisle and handed her to Derek with a father's blessing. Then Eleanor got sick. The cancer came back 5 years ago, stage 4. It had started in her lungs and spread everywhere before we even knew it was there. The doctors gave her 3 months, she lasted 2. Eleanor's final words were a command: take care of him, take care of the house. Vivienne had sat beside the hospice bed we had put in the living room, holding her mother's thinning hand, tears streaming down her face. "Promise me," Eleanor whispered. "Promise me you will take care of him." "I promise," Vivienne said. "I promise, Mom." But grief is a strange sculptor. It does not carve the same shape in everyone. In some people it hollows out everything soft and leaves only the hard edges. The Vivienne who closed the piano lid at her mother's funeral was not the same person who had played it. Something had died with Eleanor. Something in my daughter that I would never get back. She had played Chopin that day, the same nocturne Eleanor had taught her when she was 12. She played it perfectly, tears falling onto the keys, and then she lowered the lid with a finality that felt like a second funeral. She never touched the piano again, neither did I. After that, Vivienne pulled away. She threw herself into her company, worked 80-hour weeks, stopped returning my calls. When she did visit, she was polite but distant, like a stranger wearing my daughter's face. I told myself it was grief. I told myself she would come back to me eventually. I was wrong. I set down the photograph and picked up my cold coffee. The memories kept coming, whether I wanted them or not. 7 years ago, a different kind of crisis. Iris Holloway was 57 when the cancer found her. Stage 3 breast cancer, the kind that moves fast and costs fortunes. Derek's mother, a retired elementary school teacher who had spent her life shaping other people's children, suddenly needed $240,000 to survive. No insurance would cover it. No bank would lend it. Derek was 29 and had been married to my daughter for 6 months. He had nothing. I overheard him on the phone one evening. He was in our kitchen thinking he was alone, his voice cracking as he talked to a collection agency. "I understand," he said. We do not have it. We do not have $240,000. No one has that." I walked in and put my hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me with the eyes of a man who had already started grieving. "Derek," I said, "I heard the call. How much is the treatment?" "Harold, I cannot ask you. You did not ask. I am telling you. Your mother is my family now. Let me help." I wrote the check the next day, paid the hospital directly. Derek wept when he saw the receipt. "I can never repay this," he said. "Never. Just care for my daughter," I told him. "That is payment enough." Iris survived. The treatment worked. She is 71, now healthy, alive. Alive because I wrote a check that my daughter now wanted to steal back. Here is what I understood sitting in my kitchen with cold coffee and old photographs. Derek was not betraying his wife. He was honoring a debt he could never fully repay. I had saved his mother's life with a check and a few kind words. Now his mother was alive and healthy, and my daughter was trying to destroy me. Derek could not stop Vivienne, but he could warn me. He could give me time. He could choose the man who had saved his mother over the woman who was trying to rob him. Sometimes that is what loyalty looks like. Not blind devotion, but painful, terrible honesty. I looked at the clock, 8:30 a.m. 5.5 hours until the notary arrived at my house to witness documents I had never agreed to sign. 5.5 hours until my daughter tried to steal everything Eleanor had loved about this house. Gordon had told me to stay away. Derek had begged me not to go home. But I was done waiting. I was done remembering. The question was not why Vivienne had become capable of this. The question was what had made her desperate enough to try it now. What was driving her? The answer I knew was somewhere in her company's finances. The company she had co-founded with Marcus Gallagher, the man with the rehearsed handshake and the 6-minute bathroom break. Something was very wrong with that company, and I intended to find out what. I picked up my phone and called Gordon back. "I need you to look into something else," I said. "Vivienne's company, Gallagher Holdings. Pull everything you can find, financial filings, debt records, anything public." Gordon paused. "Harold, what are you thinking?" "I am thinking my daughter does not do anything without a reason, and this kind of desperation does not come from nowhere. Something is pushing her. I want to know what." Gordon called back at 9:15. "I have been digging into your daughter's company," he said, and something in his voice made me set down my coffee. In 15 years, I had never heard Gordon sound hesitant. Cautious, yes, measured always, but hesitant never. "How bad is it?" I asked. A pause. "Harold, it is worse than I expected. Much worse." The company was called Ashford Gallagher Logistics. She had used our family name. I had not known that until Gordon said it, and the knowledge landed like a blow. 2 years ago, Vivian and Marcus had started a tech equipment transport business. Server farms, data centers, specialized logistics. The kind of niche work that could be extremely profitable if you had the contracts. They had gotten the contracts for a while. The company is drowning, Gordon said. $1.8 million in commercial loans. They expanded fast. New trucks, warehouse leases, employee hires, everything a growing business needs. That does not sound disastrous, I said. It was not, until 8 months ago. Since then, they have lost 3 major contracts to competitors. Employee count has dropped from 45 to 22. Revenue is down 60%. Let me tell you what $1.8 million in debt looks like. It looks like sleepless nights and avoided phone calls. It looks like lying to employees about when payroll will clear. It looks like watching everything you built slip through your fingers while you scramble to hold on. I have investigated enough bankruptcies to know the desperation math. When the numbers get bad enough, good people do terrible things. My daughter had reached that point, and I was her terrible thing. That is fast decline, I said. Too fast. Gordon agreed. Companies do not collapse that quickly without something pushing them over. But that is not the worst of it. There is more. Vivienne personally guaranteed those loans. I closed my eyes. She did what banks often require it for new businesses. If the company defaults, she is personally liable for the entire $1.8 million. A personal guarantee on a business loan is a guillotine with a timer. When you sign it, the blade is locked high above your head. You do not feel its weight. You barely think about it. But when the business fails, when the contracts collapse and the clients leave and the money stops flowing, that blade starts descending, and there is no stopping it. Vivienne had signed her guillotine 2 years ago. The blade was falling, and she had decided to push me under it instead. So it is not just the company, I said slowly. It is everything. Her house, her assets, her credit. Yes, and Herald the bank issued a notice 3 days ago demanding additional collateral within 72 hours. That deadline is today. It is today. I sat with that for a long moment. The morning sun was climbing higher outside the window, casting long shadows across Eleanor's kitchen. The house felt different now. Not like home, like evidence. I did the math the way I had done math for 40 years. My West Hills home was worth $2.1 million. My investment portfolio was $1.2 million. My retirement accounts totaled $750,000. Combined $4. 0.5 million. Vivienne's debt was $1.8 million. I was not her father anymore. I was her collateral. Gordon, I said, my assets are worth over $4 million. I know. Her debt is $1.8 million. I know that too. With forged documents and a compliant notary, she could pledge my house by this afternoon. Yes, Gordon said quietly. She could. And based on that notary appointment at 2 p.m., that appears to be exactly what she is planning. I had spent 40 years reading desperation in spreadsheets, the way numbers tell stories of people trapped by their own decisions, the sleepless math of someone who knows they are going under. Now, I was reading my daughter's story, and it was the saddest I had ever seen. She was not a villain. She was a drowning woman reaching for the nearest life raft, even if that raft was her own father. Understanding is not the same as forgiving, but it hurts more. She is not evil, Gordon, I said. She is drowning, and she is willing to drown me to stay afloat. Gordon was silent for a moment. I know he finally said, but Harold, that does not change what she is doing. Desperate people are still dangerous people. Whatever her reasons, she is committing fraud. Identity theft, possibly elder abuse under Oregon law. The fact that she is terrified does not make her crimes less criminal. I know, I said, but I needed to understand why before I could face her. Are you going to face her? I looked at the clock. 10 a.m. 4 hours until the notary. 4 hours until my daughter tried to sign away my house. Gordon had told me to stay away. Derek had warned me to stay gone. Both of them were trying to protect me from something I had already survived in my imagination 100 times since 6:04 this morning. I was done hiding in my own kitchen, drinking cold coffee, and calculating how much my daughter needed to steal from me. I was done reading the story from a distance. I was going home, not to stop her. Gordon's trust documents had already done that. Any forged power of attorney would not hold up against a properly filed trust. She could sign whatever she wanted. It would not matter. I was going home to see it, to witness what my daughter had become, to stand in the doorway of my own house and let her know without a single word that I knew everything. I grabbed my keys from the counter where they had sat all morning. Harold Gordon said through the phone, "Be careful. Desperate people do desperate things." "I know," I said. I raised one. I ended the call and walked to the front door. Eleanor's roses were still visible through the side window, stubborn blooms defying November. She had loved this house. She had made me promise to keep it safe. I was keeping that promise, just not the way either of us had imagined. The car started on the first try. I pulled out of the driveway and turned toward Westwood Drive, toward the house where I had raised my daughter, toward whatever was waiting for me. Eleanor's voice echoed in my memory, something she had said when Vivian was a teenager, making bad choices. "Enabling is not love, Harold. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same." I was about to do the hardest thing I had ever done. I was about to watch my daughter try to destroy me. I did not go straight home. Instead, I drove to the Pearl District and sat in a coffee shop for 4 hours watching the clock tick toward 2 p.m. Gordon had called twice trying to talk me out of it. "Let the documents speak for themselves," he said. "You do not need to witness this." But I did. I needed to see my daughter's face when she realized I already knew. The coffee shop was full of people living their normal lives, couples laughing over lattes, students with laptops and headphones, baristas calling out names that were not mine. I sat among them like a ghost nursing a cup I never drank, invisible and waiting. Why did I not call the police? I have asked myself that question 100 times since. The answer is simple and complicated at once. Because calling the police on your own daughter is an irreversible act. Once those sirens arrive, once those handcuffs close, you can never go back. I wanted to see her first. I wanted to give her one last chance to look at me and remember who she used to be. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I was hoping for something that no longer existed. Gordon called again at noon. "Harold, I am asking you to stay away. The trust protects you. Let the police handle the rest." "And if I call the police on my daughter," I said, "what then?" "Then she faces consequences for her actions." "She is already facing consequences. She just does not know it yet. I want to see her face when she does." Gordon was silent for a long moment. "This is not about evidence anymore, is it?" "No," I said. "It is about seeing who my daughter has become. I need to know." He did not try to stop me after that. He knew me well enough to understand when I had made a decision. Eleanor's voice was so clear in my memory that for a moment I looked up expecting to see her sitting across from me with her tea and her crossword puzzle. "Enabling is not love," she had said. We were discussing the Hendersons at the time, their son, who kept taking money for businesses that always failed. But Eleanor was not really talking about the Hendersons. She was teaching me something I would not understand until now. That love without boundaries is not love at all. It is just fear wearing a kind face. She would have told me to go home. She would have told me to witness what our daughter had become. She would have reminded me that protecting someone from the consequences of their choices was not protection. It was enabling, and enabling is not love. I finished my cold coffee and watched the clock. At 1:45 p.m., I paid for the cup I had barely touched and walked to my car. The drive to West Hills would take 20 minutes. I would arrive right as the scheme was supposed to be complete, right as Vivian believed she had won. 20 minutes from the Pearl District to West Hills. 20 minutes of a city I had lived in for 40 years. 20 minutes of memories pressed into every corner, every stoplight, every faded sign. The restaurant where I proposed to Eleanor. She said yes before I finished the question. The hospital where Vivian entered the world. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Eleanor counted her fingers 3 times. The school where she gave a valedictorian speech about integrity and hard work. I drove through my own history like a ghost visiting the living, knowing that everything was about to change. The man who drove these streets this morning was not the man who would drive them tonight. I passed the corner where Vivian had her first car accident at 17. She had called me in tears, more afraid of my disappointment than the damaged fender. I told her accidents happen, that we would fix it together, that I loved her no matter what. I wonder now if that was the problem, if I had loved her too unconditionally, if she had learned that my love would absorb any mistake, any failure, any betrayal. Maybe she thought it would absorb this too. She was wrong. The closer I got to West Hills, the slower I drove. Not from hesitation, from something else. A need to hold on to these last moments of not knowing, of still having a daughter who might surprise me, who might have changed her mind, who might be at home right now, calling off the scheme, realizing what she was about to lose. But I knew better. The numbers did not lie. $1.8 million in debt. A deadline of today. A father worth $4 million sitting between her and bankruptcy. This was not a crime of opportunity. It was a crime of desperation. And desperate people do not change their minds. They change their methods. I turned onto Westwood Drive at 2:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the notary was supposed to arrive. The first thing I saw was the truck. A professional moving truck, white with green lettering, sat directly in my driveway. The back door was open. Two men in work shirts were carrying boxes down my front steps. Boxes labeled in black marker, living room, kitchen, study. Through my living room window, I could see someone wrapping something large and moving blankets. Something dark and familiar. Something that had sat in that same spot for 43 years. Eleanor's piano. They were taking the piano she had filled this house with for decades. I pulled my car to the curb 3 houses down and sat there, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I had expected fraud. I had expected forged documents. I had not expected them to already be dismantling my home, taking my possessions, removing the physical evidence of my life with Eleanor as if it were inventory to be cataloged and sold. And standing on my porch directing the operation with a phone pressed to her ear was my daughter. Vivienne wore her designer coat, the same one she had worn to my birthday dinner. Her hair was pulled back. Her posture was confident. She looked like a CEO overseeing a logistics operation, which I suppose she was. She turned and saw my car. For one frozen moment, our eyes met across the lawn. 40 feet of grass and flower beds and a lifetime of memories between us. I saw her face change, the confidence draining, the color leaving her cheeks, her mouth opening slightly, forming a word she did not say. Dad. Then her face went white. I opened my car door and stepped out onto the street. The November air was cold against my face. The movers had not noticed me yet. They were carrying a box toward the truck, talking about lunch. I walked toward my house, toward my daughter, toward whatever was waiting for me on the other side of the door. Eleanor's voice echoed in my mind. Enabling is not love. I was about to stop enabling. I walked toward my house with the calm of a man who had already accepted the worst. The 2 movers carrying Eleanor's piano saw me coming and hesitated, looking to Vivienne for direction. She stood frozen on the porch clipboard, clutched to her chest, her face still white from seeing my car. Dad, her voice cracked. You are supposed to be at your appointment. What appointment would that be? Vivienne. She called me Dad, like nothing was wrong, like she was not standing in my driveway stealing my dead wife's piano. I kept walking. The movers set down the piano at the bottom of the steps, the wheels scraping against the concrete. The sound cut through me like glass. Near the porch railing stood a woman I did not recognize. Heather Brennan was perhaps 30 years old, with a pressed blouse and the nervous energy of someone who had taken a job without asking enough questions. A portable notary stamp sat on the railing beside her, and a county-issued ID badge hung from her neck. She looked at me, then at Vivienne, then back at me, with the dawning realization of someone who had walked into something far worse than she had been told. Show me the authorization, I said to Vivienne. I held out my hand. Dad, it is all legal. Dr. Stokes confirmed you needed help managing. I watched her hand me the documents, her fingers trembling with a frantic kind of hope. She didn't realize that the revocable living trust I signed last night had already placed an invisible legal shield around every brick of this house. These papers she wanted me to sign would never hold up under legal scrutiny, but the act of presenting them with a forged medical report was the final documented nail in her own coffin. Dr. Stokes, I countered, my voice flat. I have not seen Dr. Stokes in 18 months. Vivienne's mouth opened and closed. The clipboard trembled in her hands. Behind her, through the open front door, I could see my living room in chaos. Boxes everywhere. The safe in my office had been moved to the hallway, its door hanging open. Empty. I took the clipboard from her before she could pull away. The documents were exactly what I expected. A power of attorney granting Vivienne full control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions. Below that, a medical evaluation from Dr. Raymond Stokes declaring that Harold Ashford showed signs of early cognitive decline requiring supervised financial management. The signature at the bottom was close to mine, very close. But 40 years of reading fraudulent documents had taught me to see what others missed. The H was too rounded, the A connected too smoothly. The pressure was wrong in 3 places. This is not my signature, I said. Dad, this is a forgery. And this medical evaluation is a lie. I am standing in front of you right now. Do I seem cognitively impaired to you? How long does it take to erase someone's identity? Apparently 1 forged signature and a compliant notary, 1 corrupt doctor and a desperate daughter. I looked at the documents in my hands and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, something colder, something final. Heather Brennan stepped forward, her face pale. Mr. Ashford, I was told the documents were already verified. They said you had early dementia. They said your daughter had medical authorization to manage your affairs. Who told you this? She hesitated. The movers had stopped working entirely, watching the scene unfold. One of them was already edging toward the truck. Mr. Gallagher, Heather said quietly. Marcus Gallagher. He handled everything. He hired me through his company. He said this was a family matter and everything was in order. Gallagher. The name landed like a verdict. Not my daughter's desperation. His design. Marcus Gallagher had orchestrated this from the beginning. The rehearsed charm at the birthday dinner. The 6-minute bathroom break. The questions about my estate. He had not been helping Vivienne. He had been directing her. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. The forged power of attorney, the fabricated medical evaluation, the notary stamps, the dates. Vivienne stepped toward me. Dad, please. You do not understand. The company is in trouble. You needed my house, I said without looking up. You needed my investments. You needed my retirement. You decided to steal it rather than ask for help. I would have given you the money, Vivienne. If you had asked, if you had told me the truth, I would have helped you. She started to cry. I know you would have. But Marcus said what? She did not answer. Behind her, the movers were retreating toward the truck. One of them pulled out his phone, probably calling his dispatcher, to explain why they were abandoning the job. Heather Brennan was crying now too, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I was just doing my job, she said. I swear I did not know. He told me everything was legal. He said you were not competent to manage your own affairs. Miss Brennan, I kept my voice level. I suggest you find yourself a lawyer. You have been made an accessory to fraud, identity theft, and attempted elder abuse. I will not press charges against you if you cooperate fully with the authorities. She nodded frantically, tears streaming. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. The color drained from her face. It is him, she whispered. It is Mr. Gallagher. Answer it. She stared at me. What? Answer it. Put it on speaker. I want to hear what he says. Her hands shaking, Heather pressed the button. Marcus Gallagher's smooth voice came through the tiny speaker. Heather, is it done? Did she sign the papers? I stepped closer to the phone. It is not done, Marcus, and she did not sign anything. Silence. Long stretching silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the polished charm. What remained was flat and cold. Mr. Ashford, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. You should know that I signed my own trust documents last night. Everything you were trying to steal is protected, and I have photographs of every forged document you prepared. I suggest you call your lawyer. The line went dead. The movers climbed into their truck and drove away without a word. Heather Brennan stood on my porch crying, apologizing, offering to testify against Marcus if it would help. Eleanor's piano sat abandoned at the bottom of my front steps, half wrapped in moving blankets. Vivienne had not moved. She stood in the doorway of the house where she was born, the house where her mother taught her piano, the house she had just tried to steal from me. Dad, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I am so sorry. I looked at my daughter, at the stranger wearing her face, and I felt something break inside me that I knew would never heal. Sorry is not enough, Vivienne. Sorry does not even begin to cover this. You did not just try to take my house. You tried to erase me. I walked past her into my house to see exactly how much of my life she had already tried to take. Gordon stood in my kitchen, holding a manila folder like it contained a disease. His face had aged 10 years since yesterday. I had known this man for 3 decades, trusted him with every significant document of my life, and I had never seen him look afraid until now. They were not just stealing your money, Harold. Read page 3. I took the folder. My hands did not shake. After 40 years of examining documents that revealed human beings at their worst, I had learned to control the physical response to shock. The body wants to tremble. The mind must refuse. Page 3 was a medical evaluation dated 3 weeks ago. It bore the signature of Dr. Raymond Stokes, a physician I had visited exactly once 18 months ago for a routine physical. The evaluation diagnosed me with early-onset dementia, recommended immediate intervention, and concluded that I was mentally incapable of managing my own financial affairs. Every word was a lie. Every sentence was a weapon designed to erase me. I read the diagnosis aloud. Early cognitive decline with rapid progression, recommend immediate power of attorney transfer to prevent financial exploitation. The irony burned like acid. They were using a fabricated claim of my vulnerability to commit the very exploitation they pretended to prevent. Gordon handed me another page. Dr. Stokes has an $85,000 gambling debt. 3 weeks ago, he received a wire transfer of $15,000 from an account linked to your daughter's company. The payment cleared 2 days before he signed that evaluation. $15,000. That was the price of my identity. That was what it cost to declare a man incompetent, to strip away his autonomy, to reduce 68 years of sharp, careful living to a signature on a forged document. I had investigated cases where lives were destroyed for less. I never imagined I would become one of those cases. The plan was complete, now visible in its terrible architecture. The forged power of attorney would give Vivienne control of my assets. The fabricated medical evaluation would justify her control if anyone questioned it. My house, my investments, my retirement funds, everything I had built over 4 decades would flow into accounts I could not access, managed by people who had decided I was already dead. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Vivienne appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale, her eyes moving between Gordon and the folder in my hands. She had been listening. Dad, I can explain. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman who had once sat on my lap while I taught her to read financial statements, who had graduated summa cum laude, who had built a company from nothing. I looked at her and saw a stranger. Gordon's voice was steady. The police are on their way. I called them 20 minutes ago. Vivienne's composure shattered. The professional mask she had worn through the confrontation outside cracked and fell away, revealing something raw underneath. She began to cry, and the sound was terrible because it was genuine. Whatever else she had become, whatever crimes she had committed, the grief was real.
I did not know, she said. I did not know about the medical report. Marcus said it was just paperwork that you would sign willingly, that it was temporary until the company stabilized.
He said you would understand. Marcus. The name hung in the air between us. Marcus Gallagher, the man with the expensive suit and the confident handshake, the man who had sat at my birthday dinner, asking careful questions about my mental clarity. He told me he loved me, Vivienne whispered. He said we would build something together once the company was saved. He said after everything with Derek, I deserved someone who truly saw me. I understood then. The affair had not been separate from the scheme. It had been the scheme. Marcus had not fallen in love with my daughter. He had identified a target, exploited her loneliness, and weaponized her desperation. 2 police officers arrived through the front door Gordon had left open. They were young, professional, and uncomfortable. Arresting a woman in her father's kitchen while he watched was not the call they had expected today. One of them, a tall woman with kind eyes, read Vivienne her rights, while her partner guided my daughter's hands behind her back. Heather later cooperated fully with authorities, providing testimony that helped build the case against Marcus. Vivienne looked at me as they led her toward the door. Dad, please, I am so sorry. I said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not break us both further. I watched through the window as they placed her in the patrol car. The November rain had started again, streaking the glass, blurring her face as the car pulled away. My daughter, my only child, the last living piece of Eleanor, gone. The silence that followed was absolute. Gordon had stepped outside to speak with the remaining officer. I stood alone in my kitchen, in the house Eleanor and I had filled with 40 years of memories, and I felt something hollow open inside my chest. My phone rang. Derek's number. I answered without speaking. Harold? Derek's voice was broken, the words coming between sobs. I just found something. On Marcus's laptop. He left it at the house when he packed. I waited. Harold, Marcus has a wife. Her name is Colleen. They have 2 kids. They live in Seattle. He has been married for 12 years. The phone was cold against my ear. Through the window, the taillights of the patrol car disappeared around the corner, carrying my daughter toward a future shaped by a man who had never existed. A wife, 2 children. Seattle. 12 years of marriage running parallel to whatever Marcus had told my daughter about love and partnership and building something together. The hollow space in my chest grew larger. Derek was still crying. What do I do? What do I tell her? I had no answer. Outside, the rain fell harder, and somewhere in this city, Marcus Gallagher was running, leaving behind a trail of broken families and stolen futures. My daughter had been arrested for crimes she committed in the name of a man who did not exist, loving a fiction, betraying her father for a ghost. I hung up the phone and stood in the silence of my kitchen, listening to the rain, wondering when exactly I had lost her. Derek stood on my doorstep at 9 o'clock, laptop pressed against his chest like a shield. His eyes were swollen, his voice wrecked, but what he said next made me forget everything else. I have 2 years of messages between them, every single one. I stepped aside and let him in. The kitchen still smelled of the coffee I had made hours ago, back when I thought the worst was over. Back when I believed my daughter had simply been desperate, not deceived. Derek sat at the table where Eleanor and I had shared 40 years of morning conversations, and he opened the laptop like a man preparing to perform surgery on himself. The screen glowed blue in the dim kitchen. I sat across from him and watched as he navigated to a folder labeled simply with a date, October 2023. 2 years, Derek said. His voice cracked on the words. I found the first message dated October 2023. She wrote, "You understand me in ways Derek never could." He turned the screen toward me. I read the timestamp, the sender, the recipient. My daughter's words typed to a man who had been planning her destruction while she believed she was falling in love. The messages scrolled endlessly, hundreds of them. I read phrases that cut through me like broken glass. I think about you constantly. When can I see you again? Derek doesn't notice anything. And then dated 6 months ago, I love you. This is for us. Dad will never miss what he doesn't know he lost. 2 years, 730 days of my daughter writing love letters to a man who was designing her destruction, and I never saw a single sign. I had been so consumed by my own grief after Eleanor died, so focused on maintaining the rituals that kept her memory alive, that I had missed my living daughter disappearing into the arms of a predator. Derek's fingers trembled as he clicked to another folder. This one contained bank records. $680,000, he said, moved in increments just under the reporting threshold. She learned that from watching you do tax work, Harold. I stared at the numbers. 18 months of transfers, each one carefully sized to avoid automatic reporting requirements. My daughter had absorbed my lessons about financial investigation and used them to commit the very crimes I had spent my career exposing. The bitter irony tasted like metal on my tongue. The money went to accounts in the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts that existed for one purpose: to hide assets from people who had a legal right to know about them. My daughter, the woman I had taught to balance her first checkbook, had been building an escape fund for 2 years. The tickets, I said. Show me the tickets. Derek clicked again. 2 airline reservations appeared on the screen, departing Portland International in 3 days. One-way flights to Grand Cayman. The first ticket was in Vivian's name. The second was registered to M. Gallagher. She was going to disappear, Harold. Derek's voice broke completely, with a man who was lying to her, too. How do you grieve for someone who is still alive? How do you mourn the daughter you thought you knew, while reading proof she never existed? I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the furniture Eleanor had chosen and the photographs we had hung together, and I felt the ground beneath my understanding shift and crack. Vivian had not simply stolen from me. She had been preparing to vanish, to leave behind her marriage, her family, her entire life, and disappear into a fantasy that Marcus Gallagher had carefully constructed around her. She thought she was running toward love. She was actually running into a trap. The coffee maker gurgled in the silence. Outside, a car passed on the wet street, its tires hissing against the November rain. Derek wiped his eyes and pulled up another document. I have been investigating, he said, since I found the messages. I traced the 3 contracts that fell through. Every single one was introduced by Marcus, and I found emails where he told those clients to back out. I looked at the records he showed me. 3 major contracts, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, each one introduced to Vivian's company by Marcus Gallagher. Each one withdrawn within weeks of signing, citing vague concerns about company stability. The pattern was invisible unless you knew to look for it. He manufactured her desperation, I said. The words hung in the air between us. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. I understood now what had happened to my daughter's company. The sudden loss of contracts, the employee layoffs, the crushing debt, the desperate need for money that led her to my door with forged documents and a fraudulent medical evaluation. None of it was accident or bad luck. He made her. Like a sculptor working in desperation instead of clay, Marcus Gallagher had spent 2 years crafting the perfect thief, and my daughter never knew she was the raw material. He had not found a vulnerable woman to manipulate. He had created one. He had systematically destroyed her business, isolated her emotionally, and positioned himself as her only hope. Derek closed the laptop and looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not just grief, but purpose. The man who had warned me with an 11-second phone call, who had sobbed on the line, telling me about Marcus's secret family, had transformed into something harder. "I am going to prove it," he said. "All of it. The sabotage, the affair, the offshore accounts. I am going to build a case that destroys him." I nodded. In that moment, sitting across from the son-in-law, who had every reason to hate my daughter, I felt something shift in my chest. Derek Holloway was not seeking revenge. He was seeking justice. And despite everything Vivienne had done to him, he was still trying to prove that she had been a victim too. "There is more," Derek said. His voice dropped. "Marcus has done this before. I found records of a woman in Denver, same pattern, same timeline. And Harold, she has been missing for 3 years. He opened the laptop again and showed me a name I had never seen before. Patricia Vance, last known location, Grand Cayman. The kitchen fell silent. The coffee maker stopped gurgling. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. I looked at Derek and I saw my own horror reflected in his eyes. We were not just investigating financial fraud anymore. We were looking at something much darker. Gordon spread the documents across my kitchen table, like a surgeon laying out instruments before an operation. Derek sat beside him, his face gaunt from sleepless nights, his hands steady in a way they had not been 24 hours ago. Patricia Vance's name still echoed in my mind, but what they were about to show me would make her disappearance feel like just the beginning. "We have got him," Gordon said. "Every contract Marcus sabotaged, every email he sent, telling clients to pull out every dollar he funneled. But, Harold, what the investigator found is worse than we imagined." He slid a stack of corporate filings toward me. The top page showed a Nevada business registration dated 6 months ago. Gallagher Acquisitions, LLC. The sole asset it was positioned to acquire was listed in neat legal language the intellectual property client lists and operational infrastructure of a Portland-based consulting firm, my daughter's company. He set up a shell company, Gordon continued. 6 months ago, while he was romancing Vivienne, he was preparing to buy her company out of bankruptcy. For pennies. Derek leaned forward. I traced every contract that collapsed. The 3 major clients who pulled out last year, the ones that created the cash flow crisis, every single one was introduced by Marcus. And I found the emails where he advised them to withdraw. A vulture. That is what Derek had called him last night, and the word landed again like a verdict. Marcus Gallagher had not fallen in love with my daughter. He had been circling her corpse before she was even dead. He had spent 18 months systematically destroying her business, introducing clients he knew would default, whispering in their ears to pull their contracts, manipulating projections to mask the damage until it was too late. The goal was never just theft, Gordon said. He wanted the company. Push Vivienne into crime, let her take the fall, then acquire the bankrupt business through his shell corporation. He would have gotten both her company and your $4 million estate. Your daughter was going to lose everything and go to prison while Marcus walked away with it all. I stared at the documents. 18 months of calculated destruction, and my daughter had believed she was building a future with this man. She had written love letters to her own executioner. Before I reveal the dark truth my investigator uncovered about Marcus's hidden life, I have to ask, are you still with me? If you're, please leave a quick comment to let me know you're still here. If you were in my shoes right now, what would you do? Would you forgive or expose? Write one word in the comments, forgive, if you try to save your daughter quietly, or expose if you'd tear the whole mask off no matter who gets hurt. Your choice here might change how you see the rest of this story. And a quick heads up, the next part contains some fictionalized details added for narrative impact. If you're looking for a strictly factual report and don't want to hear it, you can stop the video right here. But for those who stay, the real horror is only beginning. Gordon pulled out a manila envelope and opened it slowly. The private investigator he had hired, a former Portland police detective named Rita Sullivan, who now specialized in financial fraud cases, had spent 2 weeks tracing Marcus Gallagher's hidden life. What she found would change everything. Marcus has been married for 12 years, Gordon said. His wife's name is Colleen Gallagher. They have 2 children, a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. They live in a house in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood, worth about $1.2 million. He placed a photograph on the table. Colleen Gallagher smiled up at me from the image, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and auburn hair, standing in front of a Queen Anne Victorian with 2 children pressed against her sides and a husband whose arm wrapped around her shoulders. Marcus Gallagher. The same man who had sat at my birthday dinner asking about my mental clarity. The same man who had promised my daughter a future in Grand Cayman. 12 years married, 2 children who called him daddy. And 3 days a week he drove to Portland to romance my daughter with lies about a future that never existed. I looked at the photograph and felt something cold settle in my chest. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. She destroyed her life for a man who was lying about everything. Everything. Does Colleen know? I asked. Not yet, Gordon said, but she will, because this is not the first time he has done this. He pulled out another file. Patricia Vance had been 34 years old when she disappeared, a Denver real estate developer whose family fortune caught the attention of a predator named Marcus Gallagher. Her last known location was a resort in Grand Cayman that she checked into but never checked out of. Same pattern, Gordon said. Affair, financial manipulation, company sabotage. Patricia's family lost $2.3 million. She vanished 3 years ago. The FBI has an open file on her case. The plane tickets, one way to Grand Cayman. My daughter was not escaping to paradise. She was being led to a grave, the same destination where Patricia Vance had vanished without a trace. The same tropical island where Marcus Gallagher apparently disposed of the women he had finished using. Grand Cayman, paradise. Except Patricia Vance went to paradise 3 years ago and never came back. And my daughter had a one-way ticket to the same destination. We have to tell her, Derek said. His voice cracked. Vivian has to know what she almost walked into. I nodded slowly. My daughter was sitting in a jail cell right now, believing she had been betrayed by a man she loved. She did not know the truth. She did not know that love had never been part of the equation. She did not know she had been marked for death from the moment Marcus Gallagher first smiled at her. I stared at the photograph of Marcus's family, Colleen's trusting smile, the children's innocent faces, and felt something shift in my chest. Not just anger anymore. Purpose. We are going to the FBI, I said, and then I am going to visit my daughter. She needs to know she was not the villain in this story. She was the next victim. Derek nodded, but Gordon held up his hand. His face had gone pale. There is one more thing, he said. Marcus knows we are investigating. Rita followed his movements this morning. He booked a flight to Grand Cayman. It leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. The kitchen fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down hours we did not have. Somewhere in this city, Marcus Gallagher was packing his bags, preparing to flee to the same island where Patricia Vance had disappeared. And if we did not stop him, he would vanish into paradise and never answer for any of it. Gordon had already shared the full evidence package with federal authorities the night before, 38 minutes before his flight to Grand Cayman. Gordon called with the news, while Derek and I sat in my kitchen, neither of us having slept, empty coffee cups scattered between us like casualties of a long siege. But the victory felt hollow. Someone still had to tell my daughter that the man she destroyed her life for had been planning to destroy her. I should be the one to tell her, I said. She is my daughter. Derek shook his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice hoarse from the night we had spent piecing together evidence. She will not hear it from you. Not yet. She's still too angry, too ashamed. But me, I am the husband she betrayed. If I can forgive her enough to tell her the truth, maybe she will believe it. He was right, and I hated that he was right. My son-in-law, the man Vivian had deceived for 2 years, was going to deliver the news that would shatter what remained of her world. He gathered the photographs, the evidence, and what remained of his broken heart. And he drove to the Multnomah County Detention Center, while I sat alone in the kitchen where Eleanor and I had raised our daughter. How do you tell your daughter that the love of her life was planning to kill her, that every whispered promise, every stolen kiss, every declaration of love was a lie, designed to lead her to a grave in the Caribbean? I sat with that question for 3 hours while Derek was gone, turning it over in my mind like a stone I could not put down. Derek returned just after noon. I knew before he spoke that something had broken inside him. She screamed Harold. His voice cracked on the words. When I showed her the family photo, Colleen, the kids, the house in Seattle, she screamed like something inside her was dying. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where we had spread Marcus's crimes the night before. The photographs were still there. Colleen Gallagher's trusting smile. 2 children who did not know their father was a monster. She said he told her Colleen was his ex-wife. Derek continued. He told her they were separated. She believed every word. For 2 years, she believed every word. I closed my eyes. My daughter had destroyed her marriage, her company, and her relationship with me, for a man who had lied about everything. She had committed crimes, betrayed her family, and nearly fled to a tropical island where women disappeared and never came back. And through it all, she had believed she was choosing love. Derek wiped his eyes. She will testify. Against Marcus, against Dr. Stokes, against everyone who helped him. She wants them to burn. I nodded slowly. Vivian had finally seen the truth. The man she loved had never existed. And now she wanted justice or something close to it. Derek was filing for divorce. My son-in-law, the man who saved my life, who betrayed his own wife to protect me, was walking away from his marriage, and I could not blame him. Some betrayals are forgivable. Some just leave scars too deep to live with. I am filing for divorce, Harold. He said it quietly without anger. I need you to know it is not revenge. It is not punishment. I just cannot go back to who we were. That person does not exist anymore. You saved her life, Derek. I reached across the table. You warned me. You found the evidence. You do not owe her forgiveness on top of all that. He looked at the photographs scattered between us. I will always love who she was. I just cannot love who she became. He left an hour later. I watched his car disappear down the street, and then I was alone in the house that Eleanor and I had filled with 40 years of memories. The silence pressed against me like a physical weight. I found myself walking to the living room, drawn by something I could not name. Eleanor's piano sat in the corner, where it had always been polished and dust-free because I had never stopped caring for it, even though I had never played it since the day she died. The piano had been silent for 5 years. Eleanor's fingers had last touched these keys on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before the cancer took her. I had kept it tuned, but never played. Now I understood why I had been waiting. I needed to hear her voice one more time before the trial. I sat on the bench. The leather was cold through my trousers. My wedding ring caught the fading December light as I lifted my hand to the keys. I pressed middle C. The note hung in the air like a question, like a prayer. Like the ghost of every evening, Eleanor had filled this room with music while I read in my chair and our daughter did her homework at the dining table. Eleanor's voice came to me then, not from memory but from somewhere deeper. Enabling is not love, Harold. You taught me that when we raised her. Do not forget it now. I understood. I could not save Vivienne from the consequences she had earned. I could not rescue her from the choices she had made, but I could love her through it. I could hold the line between enabling and abandoning, between forgiveness and accountability. I could be the father Eleanor had believed I could be. I played the first chord. E minor, Eleanor's favorite. The sound washed over me like absolution. The trial would begin in 2 weeks. Marcus, Dr. Stokes, and my daughter would all face judgment. I would sit in that courtroom and watch the legal system dismantle the scheme that had nearly cost me everything. But as I sat in the fading December light, my fingers finding notes I had not played in 5 years, I realized the hardest testimony would not come from witnesses or evidence. It would come from me. Gordon had called an hour ago with news I had not told Derek. The prosecution wanted me to testify against my own daughter. I played another chord and let the sound fill the empty house. Enabling is not love, Eleanor had said. And in 2 weeks, I would prove I had finally learned that lesson, even if it broke what was left of my heart. The Multnomah County Courthouse smelled like old wood and new anxiety. I walked through the metal detectors at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the trial that would decide my daughter's fate and mine. The 2 weeks since Gordon's call had passed in a blur of document reviews and sleepless nights, and now the moment had arrived. Gordon waited by the courtroom doors. Beside him stood a woman I had not seen in 7 years, Iris Holloway, Derek's mother. She was in her late 60s now, with silver hair and the quiet dignity of someone who had looked death in the face and walked away. 7 years ago, she had been given 3 months to live. Today she was here because I had written a check that bought her 7 more years of life. Harold. She took my hands in hers. Thank you for what you did for me. I am here to return the favor. I squeezed her hands and could not find words. The woman whose life I had saved was going to watch me testify against the woman who had married her son. We entered courtroom 4B together. Judge Theodore Marshall presided from the bench, a 60-year-old black man with reading glasses and a reputation for zero tolerance of courtroom theatrics. He had seen every kind of family tragedy this courthouse could produce. Ours, I suspected, would not surprise him. I took my seat in the gallery between Gordon and Iris, and then I saw her. Vivienne looked up as I entered. Our eyes met for 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, but in that moment I saw everything: shame, defiance, regret, and something that might have been the ghost of the daughter I had lost. She wore county jail clothes that made her look diminished older. Then she looked away, and the stranger returned. Marcus Gallagher sat at a separate defense table, his expensive suit immaculate, showing no remorse. Dr. Raymond Stokes sat alone at a third table, sweating visibly. The prosecutor was a woman named Catherine Webb, mid-40s, sharp-featured with a kind of controlled intensity that came from years of putting predators behind bars. "Remember," Gordon whispered, "you are here as a witness to truth, not as a father seeking revenge. The jury will know the difference." The prosecution called Dr. Stokes first. He shuffled to the witness stand like a man walking to his own execution. Under Catherine Webb's questioning, he crumbled completely. "Dr. Stokes, did you ever examine Harold Ashford before signing the cognitive decline evaluation?" "No." His voice trembled. "I never met him. I never spoke to him." Mr. Gallagher provided the documents already filled out. "I just signed them. I owed money to people who do not accept payment plans. $15,000. That is what my sanity cost on the open market. A gambling addict with a medical license had declared me mentally incompetent for less than the price of a used car." I watched the jury's faces as they absorbed this. Some looked disgusted. Some looked horrified. One older woman in the back row met my eyes with something like sympathy. The forensic evidence came next. A handwriting expert explained the 17 points of deviation that proved my signature on the power of attorney had been forged. A financial investigator detailed the $680,000 transferred to offshore accounts in increments designed to avoid federal reporting thresholds. The emails proving Marcus had sabotaged Vivian's company contracts were read aloud, one devastating message at a time. I watched Marcus's face as the evidence mounted. For 18 months he had believed he was untouchable. Now, piece by piece, his empire of lies was collapsing in a room full of strangers. His composure cracked for the first time, a micro-expression of fear flickering across his features before the mask returned. Then the prosecutor called Derek Holloway to the stand. Derek walked past his wife without looking at her. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down in the witness box. His face was pale but determined. "Mr. Holloway," Catherine Webb began, "why did you warn Harold Ashford about the scheme? Why did you betray your own wife?" Derek's voice was steady at first. 7 years ago, my mother was dying. Cancer. The treatment she needed cost $240,000. Insurance said no. We had nothing." He paused. His eyes found mine across the courtroom. Harold Ashford, a man I had only known for 2 years, wrote a check. He did not ask for repayment. He did not ask for anything. He just said, "Family takes care of family." Let me tell you what $240,000 looks like. It looks like a woman sitting in a courtroom 7 years after she should have died. It looks like her son on the witness stand, tears streaming down his face, explaining why he chose his father-in-law over his wife. It looks like justice that started with kindness. Derek's voice cracked as he continued. "He saved my mother's life. She is sitting in this courtroom right now because of him. How could I let them destroy him? How could I stay silent while the man who saved my mother was being robbed of everything, including his own mind?" Iris wept quietly beside me. I felt moisture on my own cheeks and did not wipe it away. "I loved my wife," Derek said. "I still love who she used to be. But some debts are more than money. Some debts are your soul." The courtroom was silent. The jury sat motionless. Even Judge Marshall seemed moved, his usual impassive expression softened by something human. Derek stepped down from the witness stand. As he passed Vivian's table, she reached toward him, but he walked on without stopping. Iris rose and embraced her son in the aisle. I wiped my eyes and felt something I had not felt in months: hope. Then Catherine Webb stood and said the words I had been dreading since Gordon's call 2 weeks ago. "The people call Harold Ashford to the stand." I rose on legs that did not feel like mine. Gordon squeezed my shoulder. Iris met my eyes and nodded. Once a gesture of faith I did not feel I deserved. I walked toward the witness box. My daughter's eyes followed me every step of the way. In 60 seconds, I would swear an oath to tell the truth. And then I would have to tell it about my own child in a room full of strangers while she watched. The bailiff held out the Bible. I placed my hand on it and felt the weight of everything I was about to say. I had just returned to my seat after 2 hours of testimony. 2 hours of telling a courtroom full of strangers how my daughter had tried to steal my mind and my money. When the prosecutor said something that made Marcus Gallagher go pale, "The people call Colleen Gallagher." The courtroom doors swung open, and a woman walked in wearing a wedding ring that matched the one on Marcus's hand. Colleen Gallagher moved through the courtroom like a woman who had already survived the worst day of her life, composed, dignified. Her auburn hair pulled back from a face that showed no emotion except controlled fury. She was 42 years old and had spent 12 years married to a man who had been lying to her face while planning to disappear with another woman. The wedding ring on her finger caught the fluorescent light as she approached the witness stand, a simple gold band that represented 12 years of vows he had never intended to keep. Marcus tried to stand. His attorney grabbed his arm and pulled him back down, whispering urgently in his ear. For the first time since I had known his name, the predator looked like prey cornered, panicked, watching his carefully constructed world collapse one witness at a time. His face had gone from confident to ashen in the span of a single heartbeat. Objection! Marcus shouted, his voice cracking on the word. This witness was not disclosed. Judge Marshall's voice was ice. Mrs. Gallagher was added to the witness list 48 hours ago, Mr. Gallagher. Your attorney was notified. Sit down. The judge's gavel did not need to fall. The command in his voice was enough. Marcus sank back into his chair like a puppet with cut strings. I watched Vivienne's face as Colleen walked past. My daughter had believed she was escaping to paradise with the love of her life. Now she was watching that love's real wife take the witness stand, wearing the ring that should have told Vivienne everything she needed to know 2 years ago. Vivienne's hand went to her mouth, and I saw the moment of realization hit her like a physical blow. Everything she had believed, everything Marcus had told her, every whispered promise of a future together, had been built on a foundation of lies so complete that even the ring on his finger had been part of the deception. Mrs. Gallagher, Catherine Webb, began, her voice professional but not unkind. How long have you been married to the defendant? Colleen's voice was steady, clear. The voice of a woman who had practiced these words in her mirror until they no longer made her cry. 12 years this past June. We have 2 children. Emma is 10, James is 8. They do not know why their father is not coming home. They do not understand why mommy is crying at night, or why we had to cancel our family vacation. They still think daddy is on a business trip. Emma is 10, James is 8. 2 children in Seattle who still believed their father was a good man. 2 children who would grow up knowing he had planned to abandon them for a woman he had manipulated into crime. Marcus Gallagher had not just destroyed my family, he had destroyed his own. And sitting there in that courtroom listening to Colleen describe her children's confusion and pain, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness for Marcus, but a terrible understanding that my daughter had not been his only victim. Did you know your husband was engaged in a romantic relationship with Vivienne Ashford? No. Colleen's composure never wavered, though I saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped the edge of the witness box. I believed he was building a business in Portland. I believed he was working to give our family a better future. I believed he spent 3 days a week in meetings and strategy sessions. I believed everything he told me for 12 years. She paused, and in that pause I heard the weight of a decade of trust betrayed. I believed him when he said he loved me. I believed him when he promised to always be there for our children. I believed him when he kissed me goodbye every Sunday night and drove to Portland. I believed all of it. She turned and looked directly at Marcus for the first and only time. Her eyes, which had been carefully controlled throughout her testimony, now burned with something raw and terrible. I trusted you with everything. Our children trusted you. Emma still sleeps with the stuffed bear you gave her for her 5th birthday. James practices basketball in the driveway because he wants to be just like his dad. And you were planning to disappear to Grand Cayman with another woman while we waited for you to come home. While your children waited for bedtime stories you would never tell. While I waited for a husband who was already gone. Marcus could not meet her eyes. The man who had smiled his way through my birthday dinner, who had charmed my daughter into betraying her family, who had rehearsed every word and gesture of his elaborate con, sat hunched at the defense table like a beaten dog. The mask was gone. The charm had evaporated. Only the predator remained, and the predator had finally been caught. Colleen stepped down from the witness stand. She walked past Marcus without looking at him, past Vivienne without acknowledging her existence, and out of the courtroom. The door closed behind her with the soft click of a life ending. I learned later that within days Colleen filed for divorce and full custody of their children. She would also testify in the murder investigation, providing bank records and travel logs that placed Marcus in Grand Cayman during the window when Patricia Vance disappeared. But in that moment, all I could think about was the sound of that door closing, and the children who would never understand why their father had chosen greed over them. Then the prosecutor called my daughter. Vivian walked to the witness stand on legs that seemed barely able to carry her. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, her hands shaking as she placed one on the Bible. She swore to tell the truth, and then she began to confess. She told them everything. The affair that had started as professional admiration and become something she mistook for love. The late-night conversations where Marcus had slowly, carefully isolated her from everyone who might have warned her. The forged documents she had signed, knowing they were fake, telling herself it was temporary that she would pay me back, that it was not really stealing if she intended to return it someday. The $15,000 she had paid Dr. Stokes to declare her own father mentally incompetent money she had withdrawn from accounts Marcus had opened in her name. The offshore accounts she had helped him set up, believing they were for their future together. The one-way tickets to Grand Cayman that she had booked with her own credit card, not knowing that Marcus had already booked a return ticket for himself alone. The plan to steal $4 million and disappear to a tropical island with a man who had been married for 12 years and had done this before, to another woman who was now dead, Ms. Ashford. Catherine Webb asked, her voice softer now, almost gentle, "Do you accept responsibility for your role in this conspiracy?" "Yes." Vivian's voice cracked, but did not break. "I was manipulated, but I made choices. I signed documents I knew were forged. I paid a doctor to lie about my father's mind. I went through his wallet. I accessed his property records from his own computer while he slept upstairs. I was going to steal everything he had. I did those things. Me. Not just Marcus, not just the circumstances. Me." She paused. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, caught in the gravity of the moment. Then Vivian turned and looked directly at me. "What do you say to a daughter who betrayed you?" What words exist for that moment when she looks at you with tears streaming down her face and says, "The thing you have waited months to hear, I had. 40 years of fatherhood, 68 years of vocabulary, and not a single word that fit. Dad," she said, and her voice broke completely on that single syllable. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I know that does not fix anything. I know sorry does not give you back the daughter you thought you had. I know it does not undo the terror you felt when you saw that moving truck. I know it does not erase the moment you realized your own child was trying to erase you, but I need you to know, I am sorry." She waited for me to respond. The whole courtroom waited. The jury waited. Gordon beside me waited. Judge Marshall waited. Even Marcus, slumped at his table, seemed to be waiting. But I could not move. I could not speak. The words were somewhere inside me, buried under months of betrayal and grief, and the photograph of Eleanor that sat on my piano at home. My daughter had just apologized in a court of law, in front of strangers and family, and the man she had almost destroyed her life for. She had taken responsibility. She had named her crimes. She had looked me in the eye and asked for nothing except to be heard, and I sat motionless, hands in my lap, unable to give her anything except silence. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. An eternity compressed into heartbeats. I saw hope die in Vivian's eyes. I saw her shoulders slump. I saw her understand that some things cannot be fixed with apologies, no matter how sincere. The bailiff finally led Vivian back to her seat. She passed within 3 feet of me, close enough to touch, but I kept my hands where they were and my eyes forward. I felt her pause beside me, waiting for something I could not give her. Then she was gone back to the defense table, and the 3 feet between us might as well have been 3,000 miles. The prosecutor announced a recess before closing arguments. The courtroom began to empty. Vivian was led away by guards, her head down, her hands cuffed in front of her. Marcus was escorted out a separate door, already yelling at his attorney about appeals and technicalities. The jury filed out in silence, their faces carefully neutral. Gordon leaned close to me. His face was grim, and I knew before he spoke that whatever he was about to say would make everything worse. "The jury will deliberate tomorrow," he said quietly. "But Harold, there is something else." The FBI found Patricia Vance. I turned to look at him, not understanding. Found her. Gordon's voice dropped even lower. What was left of her? In Grand Cayman, buried behind a rental property Marcus used to own. Harold Marcus is now facing murder charges. The courtroom was empty now, except for Gordon and me. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and clinical. Somewhere in this building, my daughter was being processed back into custody. Somewhere else, the man she had loved was learning that he would answer not just for fraud, but for taking a life. And I sat alone on a hard wooden bench, my daughter's apology still echoing in my ears, unable to find a single word to say back. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours to weigh 18 months of lies, 2 years of manipulation, and 1 lifetime of broken trust. When Judge Marshall called us back into the courtroom, I knew from the foreman's face before he ever opened his mouth guilty. All of them. Guilty. The murder charges against Marcus had changed everything. Patricia Vance's remains, discovered behind a rental property Marcus once owned in Grand Cayman, had transformed a case about financial fraud into something darker. The jury had deliberated knowing they were sentencing not just a con man, but likely a killer. Judge Marshall's voice was steady as he read the verdicts. Marcus Gallagher, this court finds you guilty on all counts of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and identity theft. You are hereby sentenced to over a decade in federal prison. Additionally, you will face extradition proceedings for murder charges in connection with the death of Patricia Vance. Over a decade, maybe more with the murder charges pending. The man who had planned to steal my money, my mind, and ultimately my daughter would spend the next chapter of his life in a cell. That is what justice looks like. It does not look like closure. It looks like arithmetic. Dr. Raymond Stokes received 3 years and permanent revocation of his medical license. He was also ordered to pay a $50,000 fine to the state's medical board, a final penalty for the man who had auctioned off my sanity to cover gambling debts. He wept as they led him away, the gambling addict who had sold my mental competence for $15,000, now reduced to a shaking figure in an orange jumpsuit. Then Judge Marshall turned to my daughter. Vivian Ashford, given your full cooperation and testimony against your co-conspirators, this court sentences you to 5 years, probation with a suspended sentence. Contingent on full cooperation and restitution, you will repay every dollar you conspired to steal from your father, totaling $4,050,000. 5 years of probation. 5 years of paying back what she tried to take. My daughter would not go to prison, but she would spend half a decade proving she had learned something from destroying her family. As the bailiffs moved to escort Marcus from the courtroom, he turned. His eyes found Vivian, and his final mask fell away completely. "This is your fault," he snarled. "All of it. You destroyed everything because you were too weak to finish what we started." Vivian flinched as if struck. The man she had loved, the man she had betrayed her family for, blamed her with his last words before prison. Even facing over a decade in a murder charge, Marcus Gallagher could not accept responsibility for anything. His cruelty was the only honest thing about him. Gordon guided me out of the courtroom before the media could swarm. Derek walked beside me, his face set in an expression I had come to recognize. Over these months, grief hardened into resolve. We pushed through the courthouse doors into the Portland December rain. Iris Holloway waited at the bottom of the steps. Her silver hair already wet her eyes, finding mine with something beyond gratitude. She climbed the steps and wrapped her arms around me without a word. Iris held me in the rain for 30 seconds. 30 seconds of silence, of connection of a debt that could never be repaid because I had never asked for payment. I had saved her life with $240,000 7 years ago. Today she saved something in me I did not know was breaking. "Harold," she said, finally pulling back to look at my face. "Thank you. For everything. For my life. For protecting my son from making the wrong choice. For being the kind of man worth protecting. I am not sure I protected anyone, Iris. I just survived." She shook her head. "Sometimes surviving is enough. Sometimes it is everything." Derek stood beside his mother, rain soaking his shoulders, looking older than his 40 years. He had lost his wife, his marriage, and his illusions about the woman he had loved, but he had kept his integrity. He had kept his soul. The courthouse doors opened behind us. Vivian emerged with her attorney, heading toward a waiting car that would take her to begin her probation. She would return to a life dismantled, a reputation destroyed, and the knowledge that she had nearly killed her father for a man who blamed her for his own crimes. She passed within feet of us. Derek spoke first, his voice quiet and final. "We are done, Vivian. The papers are filed. I hope you find whatever you were looking for. But we are done." Vivian stopped. She looked at Derek, then at Iris, then at me. Her eyes were empty in a way I had never seen before. "I know," she said. "I am sorry, Derek. I am sorry, Dad." She waited. I could feel her waiting for something, for words I still could not find. The silent stretch between us, filled with rain and grief and years we might never recover. Finally, she turned and walked to the car. The door closed, the engine started, and my daughter drove away into the Portland rain. What does winning look like when you have lost everything that mattered? I had my house. I had my money. I had my mind, the thing they tried to steal, with a forged signature and a corrupt doctor. But I had lost my daughter. And standing in the December rain, I wondered if getting her back was even possible anymore. Winning does not feel like victory, I said quietly. Derek nodded. No, it feels like survival, but Harold's survival is more than most people get. It is more than Patricia Vance got. It is more than Marcus wanted you to have. He was right. I had survived a conspiracy designed to erase me. I had exposed a predator who had likely killed before. I had protected my assets, my autonomy, my identity. But survival and victory are not the same thing. And standing in the rain where my daughter had just disappeared, I felt only the hollow space where triumph should have been. Derek drove me home through the rain. The house was dark when we arrived. I had forgotten to leave lights on. As I stepped onto the porch, I saw something white tucked into the doorframe. An envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in handwriting I had not seen in 5 years. Eleanor's handwriting. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Derek waited in the driveway watching. I opened the envelope and found a single sheet of paper inside, along with a note from Gordon's law firm, to be delivered when Harold needs it most. The letter was dated 3 days before Eleanor died. She had written it knowing she was leaving me, knowing someday I might need her words when she could no longer speak them. My dearest Harold, it began, if you are reading this, something has broken. Let me help you fix it. I stood on my porch in the December darkness, holding my dead wife's final letter. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wept. Eleanor's letter was 3 pages long. She had written it 6 months before she died, when she still had the strength to hold a pen, when she already knew she was leaving me. I sat at her piano in the darkness, reading her words by the light of a single lamp, and let her voice fill the empty house one more time. My dearest Harold. She wrote, I know our daughter. I know her weaknesses. I know the hunger in her that was never quite satisfied, the need to prove herself that sometimes made her careless with the people who loved her. And I know that someday she may break your heart. When that day comes, remember enabling is not love, but neither is abandonment. Find the middle path. That is where healing lives. She had known. Somehow Eleanor had seen what I had missed for years. She had anticipated this betrayal and prepared me for it, leaving instructions from beyond the grave, like a map, to a place I could not find on my own. The next morning, I called Gordon. I want to change my will, I said, and I want to establish a memorial fund, in Eleanor's name. We met that afternoon. I told him what I wanted Derek Holloway included as a beneficiary. Not as a son-in-law, because that legal relationship had ended with the divorce papers. As a son. The son I never had, the man who had chosen loyalty over love and saved my life in the process. Are you sure about including Derek? Gordon asked. He is no longer family legally speaking. He is more family than blood ever made him. He saved my life, Gordon. He saved my mind. That is worth more than any marriage certificate. Let me tell you what $500,000 looks like when it is used right. It looks like families who will not have to choose between treatment and bankruptcy. It looks like mothers who get to see their sons get married. It looks like Eleanor's name on a fund that will save lives long after both of us are gone. That is a legacy worth leaving. The Eleanor Ashford Memorial Medical Fund. $500,000 to start with provisions for more. Every family that could not afford cancer treatment. Every Iris Holloway waiting for someone to write a check. Eleanor would help them now, through me forever. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, postmarked from an apartment on the east side of Portland. Vivian's new address where she was serving her probation. I read it 3 times. The first time I felt anger. How dare she write to me after everything? The second time I felt grief for the daughter I had lost, for the woman she had become. The third time I felt something unexpected, a door cracked open with light coming through. Dad, she wrote, I do not deserve your forgiveness. I am not asking for it. I just need you to know I understand now what I did. I understand who I became. And I am sorry not because I want something from you, but because you deserved a better daughter than I was. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for reconciliation. She did not make excuses or blame Marcus for everything. I hope you find peace, she continued. I hope Derek finds happiness. I hope Mom is watching, and that somehow, someday I can make her proud again. I sat at my desk for an hour before I picked up a pen. My response took longer to write than any document I had drafted in 40 years of forensic accounting. Every word felt like a choice between doors, between futures, between the father I had been and the father I wanted to become. Vivienne, I finally wrote, I love you. I have always loved you. But love does not mean trust, and trust takes time to rebuild. I do not know if I can forgive what you did, but I know I am not ready to lose you forever. When you are ready to be my daughter again, not the woman Marcus made you write to me, I will be here. I sealed the envelope and mailed it before I could change my mind. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. I had tuned Eleanor's piano for the first time in 5 years. The house smelled of roasting chicken and her favorite herbs, rosemary and thyme, the scents that had filled this kitchen for 4 decades of holidays. At dusk, I walked into her garden. The rosebush she had planted 43 years ago still stood against the fence, dormant but alive, waiting for spring. I touched its bare branches and thought about what survives. Eleanor's rosebush had weathered 43 Portland winters. It had endured storms, droughts, and the years when I forgot to tend it after she died. But here it was still rooted, still reaching toward whatever light it could find. Maybe that is what family does. Maybe that is what I could do. Derek's car pulled into the driveway. I heard Iris's laugh through the evening air, a sound I had paid $240,000 to preserve, and would pay again without hesitation. They were coming for dinner. They were coming to be family. I lost a daughter this year, but I gained a son. I lost my trust, but I kept my mind, my house, my dignity. Eleanor was right. The middle path is where healing lives. Not forgiveness, not abandonment, just the door left open and the people who show up walking through it. The doorbell rang. Derek and Iris stood on the porch carrying wine and a dish that smelled like her famous apple pie. "Happy New Year," Harold Derek said. "Happy New Year, Dad," Iris added. It was the first time she had ever called me that. I stepped aside to let them in my heart, fuller than it had been in months. The warmth of the house wrapped around us as they entered, and for a moment, standing in that doorway with the cold December air at my back and the smell of roasting chicken drifting from the kitchen, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Derek set the wine on the table and turned to me, his face carrying the quiet peace of a man who had finally found solid ground after months of drowning. Iris moved toward the kitchen, already asking what she could do to help, her voice bright with the kind of joy that only comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I was about to close the door when I saw them, headlights turning slowly onto my street, a car I did not recognize. It moved with hesitation, as if the driver was not entirely sure they wanted to arrive. The car stopped at the end of my driveway engine, idling headlights cutting through the December darkness. My hand froze on the doorknob. The engine cut off. The headlights died, and in the sudden darkness, a car door opened. A figure stepped out into the cold night air, silhouetted against the distant streetlights. Tall, slender, wearing a coat I recognized because I had complimented it once at a birthday dinner that felt like it had happened in another lifetime. I could not see her face, but I knew that silhouette. I had known it for 41 years, since the day Eleanor placed a newborn in my arms and made me a father. Vivienne had come home. She stood at the edge of the driveway, not approaching, not retreating, just standing there in the darkness, waiting, the same way she had waited in the courtroom after her apology, hoping for words I could not find. The same way she had stood on my porch directing movers to steal my life before she knew I had already beaten her. But this time was different. This time I had Eleanor's voice in my head. I had the 3-page letter that had guided me through the darkest months of my life. I had the response I had written to my daughter, promising her that the door would stay open, that love did not require trust, but it also did not require abandonment. I had the middle path. I looked back into my house. Derek and Iris were in the living room now, Derek helping her out of her coat, both of them laughing at something I had not heard. The warm light from Eleanor's piano lamp cast everything in gold. The scent of rosemary and thyme filled the air. This was family, real family, chosen family, the family that shows up. Then I looked back at my daughter, standing alone in the cold darkness at the end of my driveway, the daughter who had tried to steal my mind, the daughter who had forged my signature, the daughter who had been manipulated by a predator and had nearly paid for it with her life, the daughter who had written me a letter asking for nothing but offering everything, understanding, accountability, hope. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. Enabling is not love, but neither is abandonment. Find the middle path. That is where healing lives. I made my choice. I stepped out onto the porch, leaving the warm house behind me, and I walked down the steps. The cold December air bit at my face. My breath came out in clouds. Each step felt like a choice, like a commitment, like a promise I was making to the ghost of my wife and the memory of the father I used to be. Vivian saw me coming. She did not move. She just stood there waiting, her hands tucked into the pockets of that coat, her face still hidden in shadow. I stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough to see her now, close enough to see that she had been crying, close enough to see that she was terrified. We stood there in the cold darkness, father and daughter, separated by months of betrayal and years of distance, and a chasm of broken trust that might never fully heal. And then I spoke. I said the only words that mattered, the only words that Eleanor would have wanted me to say, the only words that were true. Come inside, Vivienne. It is cold out here. Looking back, I can finally admit something I was too proud to see before this was never just a conflict. It was a warning I ignored until it became a consequence I couldn't escape. This family story taught me that love, when given without boundaries, can quietly invite family betrayal into your life. I trusted too easily, I overlooked too much, and I convinced myself that blood alone meant loyalty. I was wrong. If you take anything from my family story, let it be this: don't sacrifice your self-respect just to preserve the illusion of peace. Don't wait for proof when your instincts are already screaming. The truth is, family betrayal rarely begins with one big moment. It builds in silence, in small compromises, and things you choose not to question. Don't be like me. Don't delay the hard conversations. Don't ignore the signs just because they come from someone you love. Protect your future the same way you protect your family, because sometimes those are not the same thing. This family story is painful, but it's also a reminder that clarity always comes whether you're ready for it or not. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. In my darkest moment, when everything felt like it was falling apart, I realized something else: I was not truly alone. God gave me the strength to stand still when everything inside me wanted to break, not to seek revenge, but to face the truth with clarity. That was the moment I stopped being a victim of family betrayal and started becoming someone who could walk away from it. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were Harold, standing in that exact moment when everything you trusted began to collapse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. And just a quick note, while this story draws inspiration from real-life situations and social themes, some elements have been dramatized to enhance the narrative experience. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better match your interests.